When my mom texted me, "Don't call or come over," I figured she just needed space. It was short, cold, and completely unlike her. Marla Rourke was always careful with her words, never abrupt. Still, I didn't want to push. I told myself maybe she was tired, maybe overwhelmed with something I couldn't see. "Stick with me while I share my story," I whispered to myself. "And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about." Little did I know, by midnight, my life would fracture in ways I couldn't have imagined. I'm Evan Rourke, 28, a mechanic in a sleepy town in rural Arizona. I've always been quiet, steady, careful with my life and my emotions. My mom raised me alone. She was strong in ways I didn't fully understand until recently. Our relationship has always been simple, predictable, comforting. That's why the message unsettled me so much. At first, I tried to push the feeling aside. Maybe she needed to focus on something at home. Maybe it was one of those fleeting frustrations that happen in life. But as evening fell, the unease grew. A neighbor mentioned seeing a truck parked at her house in the afternoon. It wasn't her usual old sedan, but something bigger, black, imposing. I nodded politely, hiding the sudden prickling in my chest. Nothing concrete, just a detail, but something felt off. By nightfall, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My instincts, which usually steer me right, screamed that this wasn't normal. Her house was 20 minutes away, but I found myself gripping the steering wheel in my garage, debating whether to call or just leave her alone. Every rational thought told me to respect her space, yet every part of me was drawn to see if she was okay. I kept glancing at my phone, scrolling through old messages, remembering our conversations, the jokes, the care in her words. None of that matched the abruptness of today's message. Something had shifted, and I didn't know what it was. My chest tightened as I imagined every possibility, none of them good. The shadows of the desert outside my window seemed heavier, pressing against the silence. Midnight approached like a slow drumbeat, and I knew somehow that when the clock struck, nothing would ever feel the same again. I tried to steady my thoughts, reminding myself of the predictable rhythm of my life, the steady routine of work, the quiet evenings. Yet, beneath it all, a cold realization settled in. Tonight was different. Tonight would mark the beginning of a story I wasn't prepared for, a betrayal I didn't yet understand, and a reckoning that would change everything I thought I knew about my mother, my family, and even myself. By midnight, I would be forced to confront truths I hadn't asked for, unravel secrets I didn't know existed, and face a reality that would demand more courage than I ever believed I had. The world I knew was about to crumble, and there was no turning back. I couldn't sleep. My mind refused to quiet itself, spinning over my mom's strange text. "Don't call or come over." Those words echoed in my head, colder and harsher with each repetition. I tried telling myself it was nothing, that maybe she just needed time alone, but every instinct I had screamed otherwise. By midnight, I found myself behind the wheel, driving the 20 minutes to her house, the desert night stretching endlessly around me. Her car sat in the driveway, just where she always parked it, but all the lights were off. My stomach nodded. That wasn't unusual. She was private, but the silence felt heavy, unnatural. I stepped out of my truck and noticed the front door was unlocked. My heart skipped. Marla never, ever left her door unlocked, not even when she stepped outside for 5 minutes. Something was wrong. Inside, the living room told a story of chaos. Cushions were tossed across the floor. A small lamp lay shattered near the coffee table, glass glittering under the pale moonlight streaming through the windows. My hands trembled as I moved forward, calling her name softly. "Mom." No answer. Just the sound of my own breath echoing through the empty house. She was gone. Near the fireplace, I noticed something odd. A piece of paper, blackened and crumpled, half consumed by ashes. I grabbed it carefully, recognizing the cursive writing instantly. It was hers. Only a fragment remained readable. My name. My stomach sank. I didn't need more to understand. Someone had been here, and they'd taken her. I followed a set of footprints leading out the back of the house, the sand around them disturbed as though someone had left in a hurry. My mind raced, flipping through every scenario I could imagine. Who would do this? Why? Panic began clawing at my chest, and I pulled out my phone, dialing the sheriff's office. The deputy who answered sounded polite enough, but his tone was off, too calm, too detached. When I explained the situation, asking for immediate help, he hesitated, muttered something about a late-night disturbance, and told me to stay put and not make assumptions. His voice carried an undercurrent of dismissal that made my blood run cold. I could tell he wasn't taking me seriously, maybe even knew more than he should. I hung up, my hands shaking. The weight of the house pressed down on me, the emptiness amplified by the silence and the shadows. It was clear, I was on my own. No one was coming. If I wanted to find my mom, I'd have to do it myself. The half-burned envelope, the footprints, the strange absence of law enforcement support, all pointed to a dangerous truth I wasn't ready to face. As I stepped into the cool desert night, I felt the enormity of the situation press down. I had no choice but to follow the trail, to confront whatever waited in the darkness. Midnight had passed, and my world was no longer the one I thought I knew. From this moment on, nothing would be the same. I retreated to Marla's bedroom, hoping to find some clue, anything that could explain the chaos of the night. Her drawers were meticulous, but behind the false bottom of her jewelry box, I found a bundle of papers tied with a faded ribbon. As I untied it, my eyes widened. Bank statements, money orders, and receipts, monthly payments to a man I didn't recognize. The dates spanned years, carefully hidden among innocuous bills. My hands shook as I flipped through them, each envelope a question I didn't want to ask. Beneath the stack of papers, I found a photo tucked inside a worn notebook. Marla was smiling, arms wrapped around a younger man whose face was sharp, dangerous, and unfamiliar to me. On the back, in Marla's careful handwriting, was a single word: Cole. My chest tightened. Who was he? Why had my mother been sending him money for years? I felt a mix of anger and fear, a knot twisting deeper with every passing second. I needed answers, and there was only one person I could think of: Aunt Lydia, Marla's estranged sister. I called her, my voice tight, almost pleading. She didn't answer at first, then finally, a shaky line came through. Her voice was trembling, like she had been holding her breath for years. I demanded to know about Cole. There was silence, then a shuddering confession. Lydia broke down, sobs spilling through the phone, her words rushed and disjointed. Evan. Cole, he's your father, she said, each syllable like a hammer against my chest. My mind reeled. My father? The man my mother had spent years protecting me from? I felt my stomach drop. Lydia's voice cracked further as she described him: manipulative, dangerous, violent. Marla had hidden me from him for decades. She had kept secrets to shield me, to keep me safe from a man who thrived on control and fear. I sank into the chair in Marla's room, staring at the walls I had grown up with, the life I thought I knew unraveling around me. Every memory of my mother suddenly took on a new weight. All those quiet nights, the protective rules, the stories never told, they weren't just quirks or caution, they were survival. She had carried the burden of fear for both of us, silently, without complaint. And then it clicked. Whoever had come to the house that day, the truck my neighbor saw, the chaos I had found, could it have been Cole? My heart pounded. The man who had been a shadow over my life, even if I didn't know it, might be the one responsible for dragging my mother into danger now. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to steady my thoughts. I was angry, yes, but beneath it was something sharper. A need to protect her, to act, to reclaim control in the face of a threat I hadn't even known existed until tonight. The pieces of the past had been hidden for years, but now they were all laid bare, and I realized one terrible truth. The man who haunted my mother's history was standing on the edge of our present. I couldn't wait. I had to find him. I had to find my mother. And I had to face Cole, the man who had shaped my entire life without my ever knowing it. The night had begun with a text, but now it was a reckoning. I spent hours digging into Cole Halden's name, my fingers trembling as I typed through old news articles, court records, and police reports. Each page painted the same picture: a man who thrived on fear, intimidation, and manipulation. Assault, extortion, threats, his history was long and violent. And the most chilling detail of all? He had been released from prison just 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. My chest tightened. 2 weeks ago, and now my mother was missing. The pieces were falling into place, and the fear that had been gnawing at me all night sharpened into something harsher: anger. I drove through the small town, stopping at every motel, every inn where someone like him might hide. The desert air was sharp in my lungs, each stop a mix of hope and dread. At the last motel, the clerk squinted at my description and nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think someone like that checked in recently," he said, his voice low, hesitant. He described a man matching Cole's features: tall, wiry, with a hard set to his jaw and eyes that didn't miss a thing. My stomach sank. This wasn't a stranger in passing. This was the man who could ruin our lives with a glance. Determined to find more, I tracked down the local convenience store that had cameras covering the desert highway. I watched the footage frame by frame, my pulse hammering in my ears. And there it was, a black truck, unmistakable, rolling steadily toward the desert outskirts. My mother's house had been in chaos, her presence erased, and that truck carried the shadow of Cole into the night. My fists clenched on the steering wheel. Rage and guilt twisted together. Guilt that I hadn't been there sooner, rage at the thought of the danger he posed. I couldn't wait for the authorities. Every instinct screamed that by now, he could be anywhere, moving faster than anyone could stop him. The deputy's dismissive tone from earlier returned to my mind, his calm attitude now a dangerous reminder. I was alone in this. No one would move fast enough for her. No one would understand the stakes. It was up to me. I traced the path the truck had taken on a map, marking possible trails, abandoned roads, and desert trails that led to nowhere. Each possibility felt like a needle in a haystack, but I knew I had to try. My mother's life, the woman who had sacrificed everything to protect me, was at stake. The thought of her fear, her fight to survive alone, fueled every step I was ready to take. As night deepened, I felt a grim determination settle over me. I had no plan beyond finding her, no backup, no guarantees, just a single consuming purpose. Cole Halden had returned from prison, a predator back in a world he once terrorized, and he had made the fatal mistake of crossing the wrong family. I tightened my jacket, started my truck, and drove toward the desert outskirts. I would find my mother, no matter the cost. And I would make sure that Cole understood that his reign of intimidation had ended the moment I stepped into his path. I rifled through Marla's belongings, desperate for any clue that could lead me to her. Among stacks of old papers and dusty boxes, I found a worn leather journal, its edges frayed from years of handling. Flipping through the pages, I could feel her voice in the careful script, her fears and secrets etched in every line. And then I reached the last entry. My chest tightened. She had written about Cole. He had been blackmailing her for years, threatening to expose something from her past, something she had buried to protect me. She had feared he had found her again. The words hit me like a punch. My mother had carried this burden silently, shielding me from a danger I hadn't even known existed. I sank to the floor, the journal heavy in my hands, trying to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the mother who had hidden entire threats from me. My anger twisted with guilt. I should have seen it, should have known. But I hadn't. All I had were signs, small, easily dismissed until now. I dug through the trash next, scanning for anything overlooked. Among the crumpled receipts, I found one that made my blood run cold. A payment to a supply store near an abandoned mining road, dated just a day before she disappeared. My pulse raced. That had to be it. That had to be the trail Cole had followed. I jumped into my truck, gripping the steering wheel as adrenaline surged through me. The mining road was desolate, dust swirling in the wind, old equipment rusting along the path. I drove slowly, my eyes scanning every shadow, every mound of dirt. And then I saw it, something glinting near the edge of the trail. My heart lurched. Marla's bracelet, the one she had promised never to take off, lay half buried in the dust. I sank to my knees, picking it up, the metal cold and weighty in my palm. Someone had been here, and it hadn't been careful. I followed the disturbed soil and noticed deep boot prints pressed into the dirt. Cole's tracks. My stomach twisted as I traced their direction. He had been here recently. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. Marla had hidden the truth from me all these years, keeping me safe, but the knowledge that she hadn't told me now, when I could have helped, stung sharply. I had lived my whole life believing in her quiet honesty, and now I realized she had carried secrets I could never have imagined. The desert around me felt heavier, oppressive, pressing in with every gust of wind. I clenched my fists, staring down the tracks. The road ahead was long, uncertain, and dangerous. I had to find her, but more than that, I had to confront the betrayal that had been stitched into our lives. My mother had protected me, yes, but at what cost? The thought of her in danger, of the man who had terrorized her controlling the next move, filled me with a fierce, unyielding resolve. I slipped Marla's bracelet onto my wrist, the weight a reminder of why I was here. Cole had left his mark, but I wouldn't let him leave a scar on us that we couldn't heal. Every step forward along the abandoned road was a promise. I would find my mother, and I would face the man who had dared to threaten the life she had fought so hard to protect. I stormed back into the sheriff's office, my mind a storm of fear and anger. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I marched straight to Darren Spaulding's desk, slamming my hand down. "You need to help me," I said, my voice tight, controlled, but trembling underneath. "My mom's missing, and it's Cole Halden. She's in danger." Darren looked up from his paperwork, his expression carefully neutral, but there was a flicker in his eyes that made my stomach twist. "Calm down, Evan," he said smoothly. "We'll get to it." His tone sounded rehearsed, too practiced, too polite to be sincere. I pressed harder, leaning over the desk. "Do you even understand who he is? He's dangerous. I've tracked him, I've got footprints, a bracelet. My mom could be dead right now." I watched him closely, and that's when it happened. Darren's hand brushed against his phone as if instinctively, and he muttered something under his breath. A detail I hadn't told a soul about the abandoned mining road, the bracelet, the direction of the tracks. My heart froze. How did he know? A cold realization cut through me like a knife. Darren knew Cole. Too much knowledge for an outsider. My voice lowered, sharp with accusation. "You know him. You've been helping him, haven't you?" Darren's face hardened, his calm demeanor cracking for the first time. He leaned back, hands spread on the desk, exhaling slowly. "Look, kid, you don't understand," he said, almost too casually. He's been around longer than you think. I've done what I had to, just keeping things under control." "Under control?" I spat, anger boiling. "You've been helping him kidnap my mother? Covering for a criminal? This isn't control, it's betrayal." He shrugged, his gaze cold, unwavering. "You don't get it. I've known him since before he went in. I ran errands, covered tracks, made sure things didn't get messy for him. I warned you before, kid, let it go. Push too hard, and it won't just be your mother at risk." The words hit me like a punch. I had counted on the sheriff's office, the law, to protect us. Instead, one of their own had been a co-conspirator, watching, manipulating, and now threatening me. My blood ran hot with a mix of fear, fury, and disbelief. I wanted to yell, to grab him, to make him feel a fraction of the rage he'd helped cultivate in Cole. But I realized then that staying would do nothing. Darren's allegiance was not to the law, not to justice, not to my mother. It was to Cole. Any confrontation beyond this point would be dangerous, foolish. I stepped back, my hands still clenched, my mind racing. I left the sheriff's office, knowing I was on my own. The local authorities couldn't be trusted. The safety net I had assumed existed was gone. My only choice now was to rely on myself, to track Cole and rescue my mother without the illusion of support. The betrayal cut deeper than anything else. The law, meant to protect, was compromised, and the stakes had never been higher. I followed the tire tracks through the desert, my truck kicking up clouds of dust in the moonlight. Every mile brought my pulse higher. Every shadow seemed alive with danger. The trail led me to an abandoned trailer, rusted and sagging under the weight of years and neglect. My stomach tightened as I parked, knowing this could be the place where Cole held my mother. I grabbed a crowbar from the back of my truck, moving cautiously toward the trailer, every step silent against the crunch of sand and gravel. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and the smell of mildew and decay hit me. Inside, the air was stale and heavy. My eyes scanned the trailer, and what I saw made my chest tighten. Rope coiled on the floor, duct tape scattered near a corner, and a small, torn piece of fabric that I recognized immediately. Marla's shirt. Someone had been here recently, and the evidence left behind was undeniable. Rage and fear twisted in my stomach, propelling me forward. A sudden movement caught the corner of my eye. Cole stepped out from the shadows, a cruel smile stretching across his face. Before I could react, he lunged, knocking me off balance and sending me sprawling to the floor. Pain shot through my ribs, the air knocked from my lungs. He stood over me, his voice low and venomous. "She owes me everything, Evan. Your mother, this town, her life, all of it. And now, so do you." I pushed myself up, coughing, my hands shaking but determined. The anger, the fear, and the desperation for my mother surged into a single, focused resolve. I swung the crowbar, narrowly missing his head, and ducked as he swung back. We grappled, the small space of the trailer making every movement dangerous. I could smell the sweat and arrogance radiating from him. For a moment, I thought I had him, but in a blur, he broke free, shoving me into the wall. Pain exploded across my shoulder, but I refused to yield. Cole bolted toward the back of the trailer, leaving a trail of scattered debris. I struggled to my feet, heart hammering, sweat and blood mixing on my skin. I couldn't follow immediately. The pain was sharp, and I realized I was bruised, battered, but not beaten. My gaze fell on the corner of the trailer he had fled from. Among broken crates, I noticed a faded map pinned to the wall, marked with a location deep in the desert. A cabin old and forgotten, where Cole had lived long before. A surge of hope and dread hit me simultaneously. This was the next clue, the direction I had to follow if I wanted to find Marla. My mother's life depended on me tracking Cole down, despite the pain, despite the danger, despite the fear. I pulled myself up, clutching the crowbar tightly, wincing as I tested my injured shoulder. Every movement screamed that I was still capable, that I still had a chance. The desert stretched endlessly before me, silent and unforgiving. But I had a path, a clue, and a purpose sharper than any fear. Cole had escaped for now, but I would follow. I would find him, I would find my mother, and I would not stop until justice, whatever form it took, was mine. The trailer's shadows whispered of danger, but also of the path ahead, leading me to the cabin where the next chapter of this nightmare awaited. The desert sky had darkened into a deep, inky black by the time I reached the old cabin. Its wooden walls were weathered, the roof sagging in places, and the air smelled of dust and decay. My truck wheels crunched over the gravel as I parked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Every instinct screamed that Marla was inside, and I couldn't wait another second. I grabbed the crowbar and edged toward the cabin, moving cautiously, aware that one wrong step could mean disaster. Inside, the shadows clung to the corners, and the faint light of the moon through broken windows revealed the scene that stopped me cold. There she was, my mother, tied to a chair, her body slumped and bruised, clothes torn in places, eyes wide with exhaustion and terror. Relief and fury collided inside me. I rushed forward, my hands shaking as I pulled at the ropes, finally freeing her from the binds that held her captive. Her skin was warm, trembling, but she was alive, and that was everything. "Evan," she whispered, her voice hoarse, breaking my heart. She leaned against me for support as I checked her for injuries, noting the bruises, the scratches, the small cuts across her arms. "I'm okay," I said, though my voice was tight with emotion. "We need to get out of here. Now." She shook her head, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice trembling. I froze, waiting. "Cole, he wasn't blackmailing me about you," she admitted, her hands shaking as she cupped my face. "It wasn't about protecting you from him. It was about something I did years ago. I helped hide evidence from a violent incident involving him, to protect you. You were just a kid. I thought I was keeping you safe, but it put me back in his path. That's why he came after me." The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. I had assumed the worst about the threats and payments, imagining my mother trapped by a past she couldn't escape. But this was something else entirely. She had carried the weight of her own choices, her guilt, and the threat of Cole's revenge for decades, all to protect me. I felt a mix of awe, anger, and helplessness. Before I could respond, the door banged open, slamming against the wall with a deafening crash. Cole stood there, silhouetted in the doorway, his eyes glinting with cruel satisfaction. "Well, well," he sneered, voice low and venomous. "Look at you, Evan. Thought you could save her, did you?" I stepped in front of Marla instinctively, my body tense, ready to fight, ready to protect. Her eyes met mine, a silent plea for me to be strong, to not let him win. My hands gripped the crowbar tighter, my muscles coiled, every sense alert. The cabin seemed to shrink around us, the shadows closing in as the final confrontation loomed. I knew that whatever happened next would determine everything. Marla's safety, our freedom, and finally, the reckoning with the man who had haunted our lives for far too long. The desert night outside had never felt so suffocating, so charged with danger. But inside, I held the truth in my hands, and that truth gave me the one thing I needed most, the resolve to fight. The cabin groaned under its own weight as Cole stepped closer, a sinister smile curling across his face. "You think you can stop me, Evan?" he sneered, voice echoing against the splintered walls. "I've survived worse than this. I've spent years in prison, and I wanted you to feel every second of the fear I endured. I wanted you to suffer." I clenched my fists, every muscle coiled with tension, my eyes locked on his. His words stoked the fire inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm, to think. Cole thrived on arrogance, on underestimating those around him. That would be his downfall. I slowly backed toward the far wall, keeping my gaze fixed on him. "You think you're in control," I said evenly, "but you've forgotten one thing. You're predictable." He laughed, stepping forward with a swagger, taunting me to make a mistake. I allowed him to follow me, baiting him toward the unstable back room. Every creak of the floorboards under my own feet made my heart pound, but I knew exactly what I was doing. Cole's confidence blinded him. He swaggered into the back room, his eyes still fixed on me, and I pressed just enough on the floor with my foot. The wood groaned, creaking ominously, but he didn't notice. I took a step back, and the rotten floor gave way beneath him with a thunderous crash. Cole fell into the debris, trapped under splintered beams and shattered wood, struggling, thrashing, but unable to free himself. I didn't celebrate. There wasn't time. I turned immediately to Marla, who was trembling but still conscious. I grabbed her arm, supporting her as we moved toward the door. "We need to get out now," I urged, my voice tight with urgency. The cabin continued to groan and shudder, threatening to collapse completely at any moment. Outside, the desert night was silent, stretching endlessly around us, but salvation was closer than I expected. I called for help, not the sheriff, who had proven unreliable, but a retired ranger I knew of Calmorrison. Within minutes, his truck's headlights cut through the darkness, and he pulled up beside us. Cal jumped out without hesitation, assessing Marla's condition and helping me guide her into the vehicle. Relief surged through me as she clutched my hand, alive and safe, finally free from Cole's reach. From a distance, we watched the cabin. Cole's struggles were futile. The beams pinning him were too heavy, and he couldn't escape. Law enforcement later confirmed he was alive but trapped under the wreckage, and he was arrested on multiple charges: kidnapping, assault, extortion, and countless others from his criminal past. For the first time that night, I allowed myself to breathe. The threat that had haunted our lives, the man who had terrorized my mother for years, was finally contained. Marla rested in the back of Cal's truck, exhausted but safe, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Justice had been served, not perfect, not without scars, but real. I looked back at the collapsed cabin, the debris still settling, and felt a quiet satisfaction. We had survived, and Cole's reign of fear had ended. The desert night stretched endlessly around us, but for the first time in years, it felt peaceful, as if the darkness had finally been pushed back. I held Marla close, knowing we had faced the storm together and come out stronger, scarred but unbroken. Weeks passed, and the desert air finally seemed less oppressive, carrying with it a sense of closure that had eluded me for years. Darren Spaulding was officially under investigation. The internal affairs report I submitted, along with all the evidence I had gathered, had forced the sheriff's department to act. He was removed from duty, and the knowledge that someone who had aided Cole was no longer in a position to harm anyone brought a quiet satisfaction. Justice, in its own way, was beginning to settle. Marla's recovery was slow but steady. Each day, I saw the color return to her cheeks, the strength to her limbs, and the light in her eyes that had been dimmed by years of fear. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in streaks of gold and crimson, she finally spoke the full truth. She recounted, in painstaking detail, the secrets she had carried for decades. The payments to Cole, the fear of him discovering me, the moment she had chosen to hide evidence to protect my life. Her voice was calm now, tinged with the exhaustion of years spent surviving in silence. I listened, absorbing everything, the weight of it all settling heavily on my chest. When she finished, I didn't respond with anger, though the temptation had been there. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us, letting the gravity of being shut out sink in. Finally, I spoke, my voice quiet but firm. "Mom, I understand why you did it. But keeping me in the dark, it hurt. I needed to know you trusted me, to be honest with me, not just to protect me from fear." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for the first time in a long while, we shared the same breath, the same understanding. It was a fragile beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. From that moment, our relationship began to rebuild. Not on fear, not on secrecy, but on trust, transparency, and the hard-won lessons of survival. The day came when I faced Cole again, though this time under vastly different circumstances. Hospital lights cast harsh shadows across the sterile room where he lay, surrounded by officers and guards. His eyes flicked to me, wide with disbelief, arrogance, and lingering malice. I didn't speak at first, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then, in a voice low and deliberate, I said, "You'll never control anyone again. Not my mother. Not me. Not anyone who matters to me." His mouth opened as if to respond, but I turned and walked away, each step steady, unshakable. There was no need for violence, no need for further struggle. The quiet revenge, the knowledge that his power had ended, that justice had prevailed, was far more satisfying than any physical victory. Outside, the desert wind was cool on my face. I inhaled deeply, letting the air fill my lungs and cleanse the lingering tension from the past months. For the first time, I felt a steadiness, a sense of ownership over my life. The shadows of my mother's past, the threats that had loomed over us for decades, were finally behind me. I walked on unafraid, ready to live a life defined not by fear, but by the choices I made, the honesty I embraced, and the quiet strength I had discovered within myself. Do you think Evan made the right choice by taking matters into his own hands? Or should he have trusted the authorities despite their betrayal? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. And if you love gripping stories full of suspense, family secrets, and revenge, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story.